Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this plastic Sherman Firefly kit in 28mm scale by Warlord Games. Shiny. Before I get started, I want to say thanks to my glorious and mighty patrons who made it possible for me to purchase this kit. Thank you all. This is an older Warlord plastic kit, and as such it doesn't have the vehicle cards or damage markers included. I'm not sure who the plastic is made by, but I don't think it's Italeri, like most of the other Warlord plastic kits that I've built. Not a complaint, just an observation. Inside the box we find this simple instruction leaflet. These instructions are simple and easily understood, though they're not quite as clear as I would like. They will do the job though. Let's have a look at the plastic. This model comes on 3 sprues. These are all pretty nice. I don't know who manufactured the plastic in these kits. The box doesn't hint at who it might be. Not that it really matters. What matters is that all the parts are on the sprue, they look good, none are missing, and everything seems to be quite neatly moulded and free from errors. At least errors that I could see. The gun had been knocked loose of its sprue gate at one end, as you can see here, which is not the greatest thing, but it could certainly be much worse. It's still there and it's not been broken. The mould lines on this kit are quite minor, which is nice. Still have to clean them up of course, but at least it shouldn't take all day. There's a variety of details you can put on this model, including 2 crew figures. One who seems to be observing and one that's on the radio, probably calling the rest of his team noobs or something. The only other thing in the box is this little sheet of decals. This looks very similar, if not the same, as the sheet included in the plastic Churchill kit. Not that that's a complaint, they seem decent and there's a good variety of markings there. Let's put this thing together. The first step, as is often the case, is to build the track sets. And these are the bits, if you didn't guess that. The upper run of tracks is missing some teeth. The teeth are missing in order to clear the return rollers, so when you glue this on, the side with the missing teeth should be facing in towards the hull. None of the parts are numbered on the sprues or the instructions, so you do have to pay attention to what you're doing here, otherwise you'll end up with the wrong part on the wrong side. I then glue the drive sprocket into place. This has keying to ensure you don't put it around the wrong way like a numpty. This drive sprocket is a little bit different to all of the others from Warlord that I've seen. The part where the sprocket teeth mesh with the tracks is moulded onto the drive sprocket itself. Interesting. I try to make sure the gap there isn't too bad. I then glue on the bottom section of track. There's nothing to guide this other than the basic shape of the tracks. It'll fit awkwardly if you try to put them on backwards. This is very easy to put together and the end result is a mostly reasonable looking set of tracks. There's a bit of a gap and some messiness at the ends, but it's not the worst looking that I've seen by any stretch of the imagination. Let's move on to the transmission housing. A choice needs to be made here. We either install some hooks or the hedgerow cutter. I've chosen the hooks. These need to be installed before you put the transmission onto the hull, because the hook parts are inserted through the rear of the transmission part. You might notice these hook parts are very small and my fingers are large, so I use tweezers to slot the hook into its mounting hole. This is very simple in concept, but it was actually kind of fiddly. Once I'm satisfied with the hook's positioning, I add some glue in behind the part. Doing it this way just makes things a little bit neater. This actually looks pretty good. In my opinion, better than the towing hooks on a lot of other models where it's just moulded on. I then glue on these rib things with the bolts on them. These simply slot into place here. It's pretty easy to tell if you've got them on upside down. But as always, test fit before gluing. If you were building the version with the hedgerow cutter, you could install that now. Though I would wait until the transmission was on and the rest of the hull was built, just to make sure things line up nicely. Next, I glued the transmission casing onto the hull. This fits into place really easily right here on the front of the lower hull. I then test fit the upper hull, and as you can see there's a bit of a gap at the top of the ribby thing on the transmission housing. It's a bit ugly, but it could be worse. You could fill this with putty or cover it with stowage of some sort. I then glue this rear hull plate on. It goes this way up. This is pretty easy to install, and you can see there's a slight angle in the part to help with positioning. And then the hull top can go on. I had 2 issues here, both mostly because I am a dumb. First, I forgot to clean up the burrs from the sprue gates. And second, unlike pretty much every other plastic bolt-action tank, this kit doesn't have the locking tab mechanism to hold the hull and turret together. Magnetization would have been good for this kit, and the time to do that would be before gluing the hull together. By the time I thought about it, I'd already finished the model. Yes, I am a numpty. By the way, the two halves of the hull go together pretty easily and without much issue. There is a bit of a gap at the front of the hull, but I'm not too worried about that. I then glue the track sets on. There is keying on these parts to ensure proper placement. Very easy. I didn't try, but it looks like you could probably put these on backwards, but maybe just don't do that? The drive sprocket should be at the front of the tank, if you couldn't tell from every picture of a Sherman or a Firefly. I begin adding details to the hull by gluing in the hatches for the driver and, I assume, radio operator. There's no hull machine gun, so there's no hull gunner. These hatches are very easy to glue into place, and of course they can be modelled open if you're into that sort of thing. There aren't any crew figures included that will fit here, but you might be able to modify one of the crewmen that are included. I then install the armour plates in front of the hatches. I use tweezers to install these to try and avoid making a gluey mess with my fingers, and using the tweezers made it much easier to see what I was doing. These are pretty easy to get into place, though there's not really anything to guide them, though these plates were welded onto the tank well after it was initially built, so maybe they don't need to be perfect, and I very much doubt they were all perfect and identical on the real version anyway. Now for some of these rings. I don't think these are for lifting the tank, more for tying stuff down. Either way, tweezers make installing these easy. And there are guide pins which are helpful. These are shaped such that there's a correct way around to install them. Not too tricky to get the positioning right with a little bit of nudging. These are fairly fine little details and I quite like them. Same with the headlamps. These simply slot into the holes on the front of the hull like so. Again, tweezers are a good idea for these. These are quite fine details too. Often these would be very clunky on gaming models like this, and it's always nice to see examples where that's not the case. To finish the hull front, I add a pair of spare road wheels, and I place them in such a way that they hide the gap between the upper and lower parts. There's also some track links and a jerry can, but I decided not to use those. I am considering using some chain later on the front of the hull for added interest and to help hide gaps. Next, on the rear of the hull, I attach this toolbox. There are two nubs that kind of help guide this part, though you may have to fiddle with it a little to get it straight. Then I glued on this box. I don't know what it's for, but the instructions seem to suggest that it should go here, and so that's where I put it. Then I install a couple more tie-down ring things, or whatever they are. Again, tweezers are really good for this. I follow those with whatever these are. Is it a fire extinguisher or something else? I think I put them around the right way. To finish the hull, I install these shackles here. These are tiny and fiddly, and there is a correct way around to install them. The outer half of the ring they're attached to is moulded onto the shackle, so you need to make sure that side of the shackle faces out and lines up properly with the half moulded onto the hull. Tweezers do help, but they also hinder. I got lucky, and this part bounced down onto my shirt instead of the floor where it surely would have been lost. They do look good when you get them installed though. Very nice fine details. Now it is turret time. I start by gluing the inner gun mantlet into the turret. This is simple. There's a kind of stop inside the opening that prevents this part from being pushed all the way into the turret, so you could glue the base on first if you wanted to and you wouldn't have to worry about the mantlet falling in. I chose to do that second for reasons. It's unsurprisingly very easy to put on. There is a bit of a gap around the rear and sides, but it's not too bad. I then turn my attentions to the gun. It's nice, but flat solid barrel ends don't do it for me, so I drilled it out. I widen the drilled hole with my knife because I don't have an appropriately sized drill bit, and it would be a pain to change them over anyway. This is easy and well worth doing in my opinion. I then glue the gun into the mantlet. The guide pin on the gun is round, unlike a lot of other kits which have a flat edge to help guide the positioning of the muzzle brake. With this you just have to eyeball it. Not really too big a problem. I think that's a pretty good looking gun. Next I attach this. I'm pretty sure it's a pistol port. There's nothing solid to help position this, so you just have to visually line it up with the portion that's moulded onto the turret. A little fiddly, but not too hard. I then glue the gun and mantlet onto the inner mantlet part. I don't know what that's actually called. Surely it has an actual name. You can elevate or depress the gun how you see fit, though unlike Warlord's other plastic offerings, there's no option to have the gun be movable, which doesn't bother me because I never take that option anyway. I then put the commander's hatch together. This is a simple matter of gluing the two halves of the hatch into the ring part. It goes together easily enough. Of course, it could very easily also be modelled in the open position. Then I glue that assembly into the appropriate hole on the turret roof. I'm not sure if it matters which way you have this facing. I'm assuming this hatch can rotate. Next, I join these two rectangular objects together. They're shaped such that they'll link together, which is rather handy. I then glue this onto the back of the turret. The forward part is the expansion to the turret rear to allow the 17-pounder gun to recoil without smashing into the turret rear. And of course the back half is a stowage box, most likely for tea. It is a British tank after all. Now it's time to make a machine gun. I glue the handles onto the rear of the gun's body, and then the ammo box, which has a helpful little guide pin. Nice and easily done. This gun then mounts here in front of the hatch. Face the gun in whichever direction your heart desires, and there it is. The Warlord plastic Firefly is complete. There are some side skirts that could be attached to the tank, but I didn't really feel like installing them. I think the tank looks better without them, and I almost never see pictures of Fireflies with them. Unfortunately, on account of me being a goram numpty, the turret just sits loosely on top of the hull with nothing to lock it into place. I wish I was paying more attention. Oh well, it's not really a big issue, and I don't really plan to hold this tank upside down that much anyway. The main complaints I have about this model are really my own stupidity. It's quite a nice model, and it was easy enough to put together, though the instructions do feel a little bit lacking. None of the parts are labelled, either on the leaflet or the sprues, and this could lead to some confusion. What looks like a little grey rectangle on the instructions could be one of a number of little grey rectangles on the sprue. Despite that, it wasn't especially challenging to put together, and I rather enjoyed myself. You might say that I experienced a little bit of serenity. I think the end result is a fairly decent representation of a Sherman Firefly, and my British force will be very happy to receive this new addition to their ranks. I am going to start painting this model sometime soon. The main reason being that Barnaby and I are going to try and play some bolt action over the Christmas holidays, and I'd like to field this tank because he'll probably bring a tiger or something. And of course, if you want your models to do well on the battlefield, they should be painted. It won't be super soon, but expect to see this painted in the coming months. So, what do you think about this Firefly? Have you built one yourself? Are you thinking of getting this kit? Let me know in the comments section below. If you haven't done so already, it'd be right fanciful of you if you were to subscribe to me here on YouTube, follow me on social media, or watch me stream on Twitch. And if you really like the things I do, please consider helping to support the channel over at patreon.com/Herberterpaderp. I shall return soon. So until then, burn the land and boil the seas. And thanks for watching me. Farewell.